The house buzzed with life, music, laughter, and the low murmur of overlapping conversations weaving a vibrant tapestry of sound. People drifted between clusters, clutching their drinks, their eyes sparkling with the electric thrill of a Friday night and a generous pour of alcohol. Lisa thrived in this environment, a magnetic force in a sleek black dress that hugged her figure like it had been designed just for her. She was the kind of woman who could captivate a stranger in seconds, leaving them feeling like they'd known her their entire life. But tonight, she wasn't just captivating. She radiated a glow that made her impossible to ignore. I wasn't supposed to be here. Lisa had brushed off the idea of me coming, calling it a casual work gathering and dismissing it with a wave of her hand. "You'll hate it," she'd said, her tone edged with something that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't concern for my discomfort. It felt more like relief that I wouldn't be there. That strange undertone gnawed at me, and on a whim, I decided to show up anyway. Maybe it would be a fun surprise. Maybe we'd laugh about how wrong she'd been about me not enjoying myself. But as soon as I stepped inside, it was clear I'd walked into a life I barely recognized. First, Lisa didn't notice me. She was at the bar, leaning in just a little too close to a man I didn't know. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a polished air of self-assurance that made it clear he was used to being the center of attention. He didn't look like anyone from her office, or at least not anyone she'd ever mentioned to me. They were laughing, their heads inclined toward each other, their body language intimate enough to seem like they were exchanging secrets meant for no one else. I held back, staying in the periphery where the shadows hid my presence. At first, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Maybe this was just Lisa's usual charm at work, her way of winning over everyone in the room. But then I saw her hand brush his arm, lingering just a beat too long. He responded with a knowing smirk and leaned in close, whispering something that made her laugh in a way that felt too private. The air in the room seemed heavier, each breath harder to draw. Part of me wanted to march over, insert myself between them, and lay claim to what was mine. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a drink and chose a vantage point where I could observe without being seen. Minutes turned into an hour, then another. Lisa flitted around the party, engaging everyone with her usual charm, but she kept orbiting back to him. Every time they talked, her posture shifted subtly, her body angling toward him, her fingers absently tucking her hair behind her ear like she was trying to impress him. My heart raced, but my thoughts were cold and sharp. I wasn't angry, yet I was calculating, weighing every possibility. The breaking point came when I noticed them slipping out onto the balcony. Alone. They were out there for 5 minutes, then 10. I clenched the glass in my hand so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. The decision was made. I followed. The night air hit my face as I stepped onto the balcony, but it did nothing to cool the heat rising in my chest. They stood at the far end, her back to me, his hand resting casually on the railing beside hers. I couldn't hear their conversation, but her body language said it all. She leaned in as he spoke, her laughter soft. Then, in a move that made my pulse spike, he reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. That was it. "Enjoying yourselves?" My voice sliced through the still night like a blade. Lisa whirled around, her face lighting up with shock before flickering into a mask of practiced nonchalance. "Oh hey, you came?" she said, her voice laced with forced cheerfulness, as if I'd simply arrived earlier than expected. Her companion didn't flinch. If anything, his smug expression hardened into a smirk that conveyed a total lack of concern. He looked at me like I was an afterthought. "And who's this?" I asked, my tone calm, almost casual, though the tension in the air was anything but. "This is Mason," Lisa stammered, her voice faltering just enough to give her away. "He's a friend from work." Mason didn't bother correcting her. He extended a hand, his smirk never wavering. I ignored it completely. "A friend from work," I repeated slowly, my eyes boring into hers. "That's interesting, because Patricia mentioned she's never seen him at the office." For a fleeting moment, Lisa's face froze, her mask of poise slipping just enough to reveal the cracks beneath. Then she laughed. a sharp, brittle sound that lacked any real humor. "Well, he's new," she said dismissively, her tone clipped. "Maybe Patricia just hasn't had the chance to meet him yet." Mason chuckled softly, clearly amused by the rising tension. "Relax, man. We were just talking." "Talking?" I repeated, stepping closer, my voice cold. "Is that what you call sneaking off to a balcony together while your husband is right inside?" Lisa's forced smile vanished, replaced by a hardened glare. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Arthur," she snapped, her voice icy. "It's not like we were doing anything." I held her gaze, searching desperately for a glimpse of the woman I thought I knew. "Not yet, right?" That struck a nerve. Her face flushed crimson, and she crossed her arms, her posture turning defensive. "You know what?" she hissed, her voice sharp. "Maybe I don't need this right now. I came here to enjoy myself, not deal with your paranoia." Without another word, she brushed past me, her heels clicking as she abandoned Mason without so much as a glance back. I turned to him, fury bubbling in my chest, but he just shrugged casually before sauntering back into the party as if nothing had happened. Lisa knew exactly what I'd seen, but instead of owning up to it, she left. She assumed I'd go home to stew in my anger, but by the time I got back, my thoughts had already shifted. I wasn't just upset, I was planning. Sitting in the quiet of our living room, I replayed the scene on a loop. Her laughter, the smug tilt of his grin, the way she dismissed me so easily. It wasn't just hurtful, it was insulting. Lisa hadn't even bothered to deny what I'd seen. No apologies, no explanations, only her attempts to twist the blame and paint me as the unreasonable one. The audacity of it churned my stomach. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment or a misunderstanding. It felt deliberate, calculated. And if she thought I'd just swallow my pride and let her walk all over me, she was about to realize just how wrong she was. An hour later, the sound of the front door opening broke my spiral of thoughts. Lisa strolled in casually, tossing her purse onto the counter. Her heels clicked against the floor as she poured herself a glass of wine, finally noticing me seated in the shadows of the dimly lit room. "Oh," she said, feigning surprise. "You're still up." "Of course," I replied evenly, my voice betraying none of the storm inside me. "I figured we should talk." She sighed, exasperated, as though I was the one inconveniencing her. "Arthur, I really don't have the energy for one of your overreactions tonight. Can we just—" "No," my voice cut through her sentence like a blade, sharp and commanding. "We're going to talk." Her eyes narrowed as she leaned against the counter, arms crossed in a defensive stance. "Fine," she said, her tone laced with irritation. "What do you want to talk about?" "The man on the balcony," I said, locking eyes with her. "Mason, wasn't it? Your friend from work." Her face remained neutral, but I could see her calculating, silently weighing her next move. "What about him?" "Don't insult me, Lisa. I saw the way you two were together." She rolled her eyes dramatically, her patience visibly wearing thin. "Oh, for God's sake, Arthur. It was nothing. We were just talking. He's new and I was being friendly. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Friendly?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "So friendly that you forgot you're married?" Her hand slammed the wine glass onto the counter with a loud crack, the sound echoing through the room. "Are you serious right now?" she shouted, her voice rising. "You're acting like I cheated on you or something. Did you?" My voice dropped low, each word deliberate and firm. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, with a bitter laugh, she threw up her hands in exasperation. "Unbelievable. You're paranoid, Arthur. You're always looking for a problem, always convinced something's wrong. Do you even hear yourself?" I stood up slowly, my fists clenched tightly at my sides. "Don't turn this on me, Lisa," I said, my voice calm but laced with fury. "I'm not the one sneaking off with strangers and lying about it. If it was so innocent," I said, my voice steady but hard, "then why didn't you introduce me? And why did you slip away with him in the middle of the party?" Her eyes narrowed, anger flashing like a spark catching dry tinder. "Because I knew you'd act exactly like this," she snapped. "You're impossible, Arthur. I can't even talk to someone without you turning it into some overblown drama." "That's not an answer," I countered, stepping closer. My eyes locked onto hers. "What are you hiding, Lisa?" For a brief moment, her expression hardened, the mask she'd been wearing slipping just enough to reveal a crack beneath. "You know what?" she said, her voice venomous. "Maybe I am hiding something. Maybe I don't tell you everything because you can't handle it." There it was, the crack I'd been waiting for. "Then tell me?" I demanded, my voice rising as frustration boiled over. "If there's something I need to handle, let's hear it." Her eyes darted away, unwilling to meet mine. She hesitated for a beat before scoffing, brushing past me with a dismissive wave. "I'm not doing this right now," she said coldly. "I'm tired, and I have work in the morning. Good night." I stood frozen as I watched her retreat up the stairs, her silhouette disappearing into the darkness. Something inside me snapped. This wasn't just deflection, it was evasion. And people only avoid the truth when there's something damning to hide. I stayed awake through the night, my thoughts racing and colliding like a storm. Her behavior wasn't just infuriating. It was insulting. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into doubting what I knew was real. Whatever Lisa was hiding, I was going to uncover it, and there would be no escaping the consequences once I did. Morning came, bringing with it a quiet but searing determination. Lisa's dismissal from the night before only fanned the flames. She was keeping secrets, big ones, and I was finished waiting for her to slip up on her own. If she wanted to leave me in the dark, then I'd have to turn the lights on myself. At breakfast, Lisa acted like nothing had happened. She hummed softly to herself as she buttered her toast, scrolling through her phone with an air of casual detachment. But I noticed the small things. How she angled the screen just enough to keep me from seeing it. Subtle but deliberate. "I'll be home late tonight," she said, her tone light. "Another work thing." I didn't respond. I simply nodded. My silence seemed to unsettle her, but she didn't press the issue. She finished her coffee, leaned down to plant a kiss on my cheek, cold and perfunctory, then grabbed her keys and left as if the world hadn't shifted beneath our feet. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I sprang into action. The first place I searched was her closet. Lisa was meticulous, always careful, and it made me wonder if that precision had left her careless somewhere else. I combed through her belongings, looking for anything that felt out of place. That's when I found it. A shoebox, buried behind a stack of neatly folded sweaters. Inside were receipts, dozens of them. They painted a picture that made my stomach twist. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, bars I'd never been to, even a boutique hotel downtown. Each slip of paper was like a puzzle piece I didn't want to assemble, but the image they formed was undeniable. Next, I turned to her laptop. Lisa rarely used it, but when she did, she always logged out of her accounts. Fortunately, she wasn't as diligent about clearing her search history. Most of it was harmless recipes, shopping, work-related queries. But one entry stopped me cold. How to keep private messages hidden. It hit like a punch to the gut. Whatever she was involved in, she wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. The final blow came when I checked her email. She'd logged out, of course, but she hadn't cleared her drafts folder. My breath caught as I opened an unsent message addressed to someone named Mason. The subject line read simply, "Last night." And the body, cut deeper than I thought words could. "Hey, just wanted to say I had a great time yesterday. Sorry Arthur showed up. It was awkward, but he doesn't suspect anything serious. Let me know when you're free again." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling as I read it again, then again. Each word was like a knife, slicing away any lingering doubt. There was no remorse, no guilt, just casual indifference, as if I was nothing more than an obstacle to her fun. I closed the laptop, my jaw tightening. Lisa had underestimated me, and she was about to find out just how wrong she was. It was worse than if she'd outright admitted it. Seeing the evidence laid bare like that made the moment feel surreal, almost dreamlike. There it was. The confirmation I had dreaded but already knew deep down. Lisa was cheating. And worse, she seemed so confident in her ability to keep it hidden that she didn't think twice about leaving a trail. She believed there would be no consequences. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, the weight of everything crashing down on me. My mind spiraled with questions, painful, unsettling questions. How long had this been happening? Did her friends know? Did everyone know but me? The sharp buzz of my phone jolted me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Lisa. "Don't wait up tonight. I'll grab dinner with the team." Lies. Every word of it. But this time, I wasn't going to sit back and let her weave her deceitful web around me. My response was calm, calculated. "Sounds good. Have fun." Then I picked up the phone and made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. Her best friend, Patricia. "Hey, Patricia," I said when she answered, my tone steady but direct. "Got a minute?" "Sure," she replied, her voice warm but tinged with caution. "What's up?" "I need your help," I said, keeping my voice even. "And I need you to be honest with me." There was a pause, the kind of silence that weighs heavy. "What's going on, Arthur?" I told her everything. The party, the balcony, the receipts, the email. I left nothing out. To her credit, Patricia didn't interrupt or try to defend Lisa. When I finished, there was a long silence. "I don't know what to say," she finally admitted. "But I've noticed things too. Little things. I didn't want to believe it, but yeah, something's definitely off. Can you do me a favor?" I asked, the edge in my voice unmistakable. "Find out where she's really going tonight." Patricia hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but Arthur, be careful. If she's hiding something, she's not going to take kindly to you digging into it." "Don't worry," I said, my voice colder than I expected. "I'm done playing by her rules." That night I waited, and as I waited I planned. Lisa didn't come home right after work, just as she'd claimed she wouldn't. But now, armed with the truth of her lies, I felt an unsettling calm in place of my usual storm of doubts. The anger was still there, but it had morphed into something more focused, more purposeful. It wasn't long before Patricia called me back. "She's at the Orchid Lounge," Patricia said, her voice cautious, like she was afraid of setting me off. "She's sitting in the back with some guy in a navy blazer. Arthur, it's not a work dinner." The words struck like a blow, but I kept my composure. "Thanks, Patricia. I owe you one." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her concern evident. "You'll see," I said, ending the call before she could ask anything else. I grabbed my coat and headed for the car. The Orchid Lounge wasn't far, just one of those upscale downtown spots where executives and their side flings went to play out their fantasies of discretion. My chest burned with every passing mile, but my mind stayed sharp. I wasn't going there to make a scene or confront her in public. This was about truth, cold, hard, undeniable truth, and I wanted it to unravel on my terms. When I arrived, I parked across the street and waited. The lounge's large windows offered just enough of a view to confirm what I already knew. There she was, seated across from Mason. She leaned in close, laughing at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. They looked comfortable, like this wasn't their first time, like this wasn't something they needed to hide from each other. I snapped a photo. One click and the moment was frozen, a clean, irrefutable piece of evidence. I had what I needed, but I wasn't done yet. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Lisa. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said casually. "What's up?" "Just checking in," I said, keeping my tone light and conversational. "How's dinner with the team?" There was a pause, so brief most people wouldn't notice it. But I did. "Oh, it's good," she said, her voice steady, rehearsed. "We're just wrapping up now." "I'll be home in about an hour," Lisa said, her voice smooth and casual. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Great. Looking forward to seeing you." "Me too," she replied, the lie sliding off her tongue like it was second nature. "See you soon." I hung up, my smile fading as quickly as it had appeared. She didn't even falter. From my position, I watched as they paid the bill and left the lounge together. Keeping my distance, I followed, my headlights dimmed to avoid drawing attention. They didn't head to another bar or back to her office. Instead, they made their way to a small boutique hotel just outside downtown, the very same one I'd seen on those receipts in her closet. I parked across the street, my eyes fixed on the glowing hotel sign, which felt like it was mocking me. A part of me wanted to storm in right then to demand answers to make a scene. But I knew that approach wouldn't work. Lisa was too skilled at twisting the narrative, too quick on her feet. If I confronted her now, she'd wriggle out of it, flipping the script until I was the one questioning myself. No, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, irrefutable, undeniable proof. Pulling my hoodie over my head to shield my face from the hotel cameras, I slipped inside. My steps were purposeful as I approached the front desk. "Hi," I said to the clerk, forcing a sheepish grin. "I think my wife just checked in, but I'm awful at remembering room numbers. Any chance you could help me out?" The clerk raised a skeptical brow. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't disclose guest information." I sighed, pulling out my wallet and sliding a $50 bill across the counter. "Come on, man," I said, leaning in conspiratorially. "It's our anniversary, and I'm just trying to surprise her." The clerk hesitated, glancing between the cash and my face. After a moment of deliberation, he exhaled and pocketed the bill. "Room 324, he muttered under his breath. "Thanks," I said, my pulse racing as I made my way toward the stairs. When I reached the door to room 324, I stopped, straining to hear through the door. Muffled voices filtered through, low tones, punctuated by occasional laughter. My hands clenched into fists as my mind conjured images of them inside, carefree and intimate, as though I didn't even exist. But I didn't kick the door in. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and hit record. This wasn't just about catching Lisa in the act, it was about regaining control. She'd been pulling the strings for too long, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I needed to be precise, deliberate. The quiet hallway outside room 324 felt oppressive, every sound amplified in the stillness. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. Rage wouldn't help me here. Methodical action would. The recording captured everything. The laughter. The faint hum of voices just beyond the door. I held my breath, stepping closer to pick up any stray words, but the sound was too muffled. Not that it mattered. Their mere presence in that room spoke volumes. I debated my next move. Barging in would feel satisfying, sure, but it wouldn't get me what I truly wanted. Lisa would spin it, twist the narrative until I was the irrational, jealous husband. No, this wasn't about vengeance, it was about taking control and flipping the script. I stepped back and returned downstairs, my footsteps light and deliberate. At the front desk, the clerk looked surprised to see me again. "Can I help you with something else, sir?" he asked, his voice wary. "Actually, yes," I said, pulling out another 50 and placing it on the counter. "I need to speak with the manager on duty." The man hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod before disappearing into a back room. A few moments later, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor approached me. "Good evening," she said, her tone professional but cautious. "I'm Lila, the manager. Is there an issue?" "There might be," I replied, lowering my voice to sound calm but serious. "My wife is upstairs with another man. I believe she's cheating on me, and I need proof for my divorce proceedings. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I just need your cooperation." Lila's expression remained firm, her professionalism unshaken. "We value our guests' privacy here. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." I didn't let her finish. I reached into my wallet and placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter. Her eyes flicked to it, and for the first time her resolve faltered. "I'm not asking for private information," I said, keeping my voice even and controlled. "I just need access to the security feed from this floor. 5 minutes. That's all." She hesitated, glancing around the lobby to ensure no one was watching. Then she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "This stays between us," she said firmly. "Absolutely." 10 minutes later, I was in a small, dimly lit office, watching the grainy security footage on a flickering screen. My chest tightened as the video played. There they were, Lisa and Mason, walking down the hallway outside room 324. Her hand rested lightly on his arm as they laughed together, their ease and comfort with each other unmistakable. They paused at the door, sharing a moment that twisted my stomach into knots. Then, without hesitation, they disappeared inside. It was enough. More than enough. When I left the hotel, I had everything I needed. The recording on my phone. The footage emailed to myself. Proof. Evidence. Leverage. But as much as the logical part of me felt a cold satisfaction, the emotional side of me was in turmoil. Anger, betrayal, sadness. It all churned together, leaving me raw. The image of Lisa laughing with him, so carefree, burned into my mind. When I got home, the house was dark and eerily quiet. Of course, Lisa wasn't back yet. She was probably still with him, smugly confident that her secrets were safe. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. My thumb hovered over her contact, tempted to call and demand answers, to confront her with the undeniable truth. But I stopped myself. No, not yet. Let her live in her fantasy for a little longer. Instead, I texted Patricia. "Thanks for your help tonight. I have everything I need. Let's catch up tomorrow." Her reply came quickly. "Glad you got what you needed. Are you okay?" "Not yet," I typed back. "But I will be." The rest of the night was spent preparing. Tomorrow, the facade would crumble, and Lisa would have no choice but to face the truth. My truth. The next morning, I heard the familiar sound of her keys in the door. Lisa breezed into the kitchen as if nothing was out of the ordinary. She was still wearing the same dress from the night before, her heels clicking confidently against the hardwood floor. The faint scent of wine and her expensive, reserved for special occasions perfume lingered in the air. "Morning," she said brightly, grabbing a glass of water. "Sorry I got in so late. You were already asleep when I got back." I didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch out, her words hanging between us. She was testing the waters, trying to gauge my mood. "Busy night?" I finally asked, my tone calm, neutral. She shrugged, taking a sip of water. "Yeah, just the usual. Team dinner, lots of talk about that new client we landed. Pretty exhausting, honestly." "Interesting," I said, leaning back in my chair. My eyes were locked on hers. "Because I stopped by the Orchid Lounge last night. Funny, I didn't see anyone from your team there." For the briefest of moments, the glass froze halfway to her lips. Her composure cracked, just slightly, before she recovered with that practiced, fake smile of hers. "You must have missed us. We were in the back." I nodded slowly, the weight of her words only adding fuel to my resolve. "The back, huh? With Mason." Her smile tightened, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Mason was there, sure. He's part of the team, Arthur. I don't understand why you're making this a thing." "Oh, I'm not making it a thing," I said, my voice dropping dangerously low. "You did that when you walked into a hotel room with him last night." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. For a moment, she looked like a child caught stealing cookies, her expression betraying a mix of fear and guilt. "I don't know what you think you saw," she finally stammered, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. "This is ridiculous." Lisa spat, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You're being paranoid again." I leaned forward, my gaze locking onto hers, cold and unwavering. "Don't insult my intelligence, Lisa," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through her excuses. "I have the hotel security footage. I have the receipt from the room you booked last month. And I have the draft email you were too careless to delete. So go on, keep lying. Dig yourself an even deeper hole. I'm listening." Her mouth opened and closed, her composure crumbling like a sandcastle hit by a wave. The confidence, the smugness, all of it vanished in an instant. "Arthur, it's not what you think," she stammered, her voice breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. "He's just a friend. We needed privacy to talk about work. That's all it was, I swear." "Work?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "Is that what they're calling it now? Because the way you touched him on the balcony, the way you smiled at him, it didn't look like a business meeting to me." Her tears evaporated as anger flared in their place. "You've been spying on me?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Following me around like some kind of psycho? Maybe if you trusted me, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Her audacity was like gasoline on an already roaring fire. "Trusted you," I snapped, standing so abruptly that my chair screeched against the floor. "You've been lying to my face for who knows how long, sneaking around, gaslighting me, and now you're playing the victim? Don't even try it." Her anger dissolved, replaced by a desperate, pleading tone. "Okay, fine," she said, her voice shaking. "I messed up, but it wasn't serious, Arthur. It didn't mean anything. I was just lonely, okay? You've been so distant lately, and Mason, he was just there." I cut her off with a sharp, humorless laugh. "Don't you dare put this on me," I growled. "You were the one out there, laughing with him, touching him, going behind my back. You made that choice, Lisa, not me." She sank into the nearest chair, her face buried in her hands. Her voice was muffled when she finally spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. I don't know what I was thinking." I stared at her, a storm of emotions churning inside me. Rage, disgust, pity. But her words rang hollow. She wasn't apologizing because she felt remorse. She was apologizing because she'd been caught. "You weren't thinking about me," I said, my tone icy. "You weren't thinking about the life we built together. You were thinking about yourself." The silence between us was suffocating, thick with unspoken truths and shattered trust. Finally, Lisa lifted her head, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. "Can we fix this?" she asked, her voice small, almost childlike. The question hit me harder than I expected, like a punch to the gut. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe this was salvageable, that we could patch up the cracks and pretend it hadn't happened. But the damage she'd done wasn't just to our marriage. It was to my trust, my dignity, my sense of self. "I don't think we can," I said quietly, each word like a final nail in the coffin. "You made your choice, Lisa, and now I'm making mine." Her face crumpled as fresh sobs overtook her, but I didn't stay to watch. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving her alone with the ruins of the life she'd destroyed. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. The cold air hit my face as I stepped outside, but it wasn't enough to extinguish the fire raging inside me. Lisa's tear-streaked face lingered in my mind as I drove aimlessly, but not because I felt sympathy. Her tears weren't for me. They were for herself, for being caught, for losing the game she'd been playing behind my back. Eventually, I parked in a secluded lot overlooking the city skyline. I turned off the engine, letting the silence envelop me. It was deafening, but I needed it. My thoughts were loud enough. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd stored the evidence. The grainy video of her and Mason entering the hotel. The photo of them at the Orchid Lounge. The email draft that sealed her fate. It was all there, plain as day. A collection of truths she couldn't escape from. As I stared at the screen, my jaw tightened. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about taking back control. Lisa's lies had unraveled, and now the consequences were hers to bear. Proof. That's what I had. A stark, undeniable reminder that my marriage had been a lie. I forwarded the video and photos to my lawyer with a short, decisive message. "We need to move forward with this." Minutes later, my phone buzzed with a reply. "Understood. Let's meet tomorrow to finalize the details." I stared at the screen, the weight of those words settling over me like a heavy blanket. Divorce. It wasn't a word I'd ever thought would apply to me. Then again, I never imagined the woman I loved could betray me so completely. The thought of returning to the house, to Lisa, made my stomach churn. I needed air, space, clarity. I called Patricia. "Hey," she answered, her voice cautious. "How are you holding up?" "Barely," I admitted, the vulnerability in my voice surprising even me. "Do you have some time? I need to get out of the house, and you're the only person I trust to talk to right now." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. "Yeah, come over. I'll make coffee." When I arrived at Patricia's apartment, she was waiting with a steaming mug and a quiet look of concern. I sat heavily on her couch, clutching the coffee as if it could anchor me. "So," she said gently, taking a seat across from me. "What happened?" I told her everything. Lisa's lies, the confrontation, the damning evidence I'd uncovered. Patricia listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from sympathy to quiet anger as the story unfolded. "I don't even know who she is anymore," I said, my voice raw. "The woman I married would never have done this. Now I feel like I've been living with a stranger." "She's been selfish," Patricia said bluntly, her jaw tight, "and cruel. You didn't deserve this, Arthur." "No, I didn't," I agreed, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "But what hurts the most is that she didn't even try to fight for us until it was too late. She only cared once she got caught." Patricia nodded, her anger simmering beneath the surface. "I hate to say this," she said carefully, "but I think she's been like this for a while. She just got better at hiding it." Her words stung, but deep down, I knew she was right. The signs had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see them. "What do I do now?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "How do I even begin to move forward?" "You move forward," Patricia said firmly, her voice like steel. "You take back control of your life. Don't let her drag you down any more than she already has." I nodded slowly, her words settling over me like armor. She was right. Lisa had already taken so much from me. My trust, my happiness, my sense of stability. I wouldn't let her take my future too. Before I left, Patricia handed me a small box. "Here," she said. "I think you'll need this." "What is it?" I asked, opening the lid. Inside was a tiny digital recorder. "Proof," she said simply. "In case she tries to spin this around on you." I stared at the recorder for a moment, a new determination settling over me. Lisa might think she could control the narrative, but not this time. Not anymore. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Lisa's car was in the driveway, so I knew she hadn't left. I set the recorder on the kitchen counter and sat down to wait. This wasn't just about confrontation anymore. It was about closure, about finally tearing off the carefully placed bandage over the gaping wound of our marriage. I didn't have to wait long. Lisa emerged from the bedroom, dressed in sweatpants and a loose hoodie. She looked drained, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She stopped abruptly when she saw me sitting there, her expression shifting between annoyance and unease. "You're back," she said, her tone guarded. "I thought you'd be out." "Why?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "So you could make another call? Plan your next work meeting?" Her face hardened. "I don't have the energy for this, Arthur." I said I was sorry, and I meant it. "What more do you want from me?" "An apology doesn't fix this," I said coldly. "And I'm not here to argue. I'm here for the truth. For once." "I've already told you everything," she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. "What else do you want me to say? I made a mistake. I'm human. Is that what you want to hear?" "No," I said, leaning forward, my gaze piercing. "I want you to stop lying." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm not lying." "Really?" I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. With a few taps, I brought up the hotel footage and turned the screen toward her. "Explain this, then. You and Mason walking into a hotel room together. Was that a mistake too?" Her face went ashen, and for a brief moment, I thought she might faint. Then, as if a switch had flipped, her expression contorted with anger. "You followed me?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. I got the truth, I shot back. Because you wouldn't give it to me. Her fists clenched at her sides, her facade of composure shattering completely. Do you even hear yourself? You sound insane. Spying on me? Recording me? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? I said, standing abruptly, my voice rising. I'm not the one sneaking around with someone else, lying to their spouse's face, and then playing the victim when I get caught. She opened her mouth to reply, but I wasn't done. Do you know what's wrong with you, Lisa? I asked, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. You didn't even bother to hide it. You thought I was so blind, so stupid, that I wouldn't notice. And when I did, you didn't apologize. You tried to manipulate me, to make me doubt myself. Her anger faltered, replaced by something smaller, more fragile. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I was lonely. We've been so distant, and Mason. Don't. I interrupted, my tone sharp as steel. Don't you dare blame this on me. If you were lonely, you could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt. But you didn't. You chose to cheat. You chose to betray me. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. She reached out, as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back, the distance between us growing as I spoke the next words. I filed for divorce, I said, the weight of the statement hanging heavy in the room. The papers will be ready tomorrow. I suggest you get a lawyer. Her hand froze midair, her face crumpling as the reality hit her. Divorce? She whispered, her voice breaking. Arthur, no. We can fix this. Please. There's nothing to fix, I said coldly. You didn't just ruin our marriage, Lisa. You destroyed the trust that held it together. And without that, there's nothing left. She sank into the nearest chair, her sobs filling the heavy silence. I'd spent enough time trying to hold us together while she secretly tore us apart. As I walked out the door, the recorder in my pocket felt lighter, as if the weight of the truth had finally been lifted from my shoulders. The turning point had come and gone, and I wasn't looking back. This was the end of us, but it was also the beginning of something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. That's what I told myself I was chasing as I drove aimlessly through the night, but my thoughts refused to let me feel it. Everything replayed in my mind on an endless loop. Lisa's tears, her hollow excuses, her desperate pleas. None of it meant anything anymore. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was. Selfish, manipulative, and utterly devoid of genuine remorse. Yet even as the weight of my decision to file for divorce settled on my shoulders, a gnawing question refused to leave me. Not why she cheated. I'd already accepted that as her choice. But why it had been so easy for her. So blatant. Was Mason the beginning of this? Or was he just the latest in a line I hadn't seen? Had there been others? That thought burrowed into me, relentless and unshakable. I pulled into a quiet diner and ordered a black coffee, seeking clarity in the corner booth. As the waitress refilled my cup, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling. Old messages, emails, photos, anything that might offer an answer. The deeper I dug, the more cracks I found. There were texts where she claimed to be out with Patricia, only for Patricia's Instagram to show her somewhere entirely different. Photos of Lisa at events I hadn't been invited to, captioned with vague lines like work night out or team bonding. And then there were the gaps, chunks of unaccounted for time brushed off with casual excuses about errands or the gym. I was in the middle of combing through her social media when Patricia called. Hey, she said softly, her tone tentative. I've been thinking about what happened earlier. Are you okay? As okay as I can be, I said, swirling the coffee in my mug. But something's bugging me, Patricia. I can't shake the feeling that Mason wasn't the first. Am I crazy? She hesitated, the silence between us heavy. I could almost hear her biting her lip on the other end. Arthur. I didn't want to say anything before because I didn't have proof. But yeah, there were rumors. I heard things over the past year that made me wonder. What things? I pressed, my grip tightening on the phone. Just little comments she made. Patricia admitted, her voice hesitant. Like when we'd go out for drinks, and she'd mention a flirty client or a cute coworker. She always played it off as a joke, but sometimes it felt off. And there was this one time last summer. She said she had to work late, but I saw her downtown with some guy. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I didn't say anything. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. If Mason wasn't the first, then Lisa had been betraying me for far longer than I'd realized. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice shaking. I didn't know how, Patricia said, her tone laden with guilt. And I didn't want to be wrong. I'm so sorry, Arthur. It's not your fault, I said, though the knot in my chest tightened. Thanks for being honest. After hanging up, I sat there, staring at the swirling steam rising from my coffee. Patricia's words felt like the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. Mason wasn't the root of the problem. He was just the latest symptom of something that had been decaying for years. Lisa's betrayals had gone far deeper than I'd wanted to admit. I left the diner and drove straight to my lawyer's office. The papers were ready, and I signed them without hesitation. Watching the ink dry brought a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness. But above all, I felt a sense of finality. When I returned home that evening, Lisa was waiting for me in the living room. She looked disheveled, her hair messy and her eyes red and swollen from crying. The sight might have once softened me, but not now. My resolve remained unshaken. I know you've been digging, she said quietly, her voice strained. Patricia told me you've been asking questions, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course I've been digging, I replied, setting my bag down with a deliberate thud. You've been lying to me for years. Did you really think I'd just sit back and let you? Her lips trembled, and for a fleeting moment, I thought she might deny it. Instead, she collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I don't even know who I am anymore, she said, her voice muffled and broken. I didn't mean for things to get this far. Stop, I said sharply, my tone cutting through her self-pity. Don't make this about you. You've already taken enough from me. The least you can do is own up to what you've done. She looked up, tears streaming down her face, her anguish laid bare. I messed up. I know I did. But I swear, Arthur, I still love you. Doesn't that mean anything? I stared at her, my chest tightening with a mixture of anger and pity. Love isn't enough, Lisa. Not when there's no trust. Not when you've treated me like a fool for so long. Her sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking as she broke down completely. But I didn't stay to comfort her. I turned and walked to the bedroom, closing the door firmly behind me. That night, as I lay in bed alone, the weight of the past year seemed to lift. Lisa's lies, her betrayals, her manipulations. They were losing their grip on me. For the first time in months, I felt something that had been elusive for far too long. Clarity. The house of cards Lisa had built was finally collapsing, and I wasn't trapped inside anymore. I was walking away, and there was no turning back. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, sharp and unrelenting. It didn't bring warmth. It brought clarity. A cold, undeniable reminder that today was the day I closed this chapter of my life with Lisa for good. When I walked into the kitchen, she was there, sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, as though the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it evaporated as quickly as it came. This wasn't my burden to carry anymore. She glanced up as I entered, her expression a heartbreaking mix of hope and desperation. Arthur, she croaked, her voice hoarse. Can we just talk? Please. I shook my head, keeping my tone calm but resolute. There's nothing left to say, Lisa. The papers are signed. It's done. Her face crumpled, and she clutched her mug like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. I'll change, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off everyone who... Stop, I interrupted, holding up a hand. Don't humiliate yourself any further. You're not sorry for what you did, Lisa. You're sorry you got caught. If you truly wanted to fix this, you would have come clean the first time you felt guilty. But you didn't. You kept lying, I said, my voice firm but steady. You kept sneaking around, even after I gave you chances to come clean. Her lips trembled as if she was about to argue. But then she sank back into her chair, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I didn't think you'd leave, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought you'd forgive me. I exhaled, the weight of her words only solidifying what I already knew. That's the problem, Lisa, I said, shaking my head. You didn't think about me at all. You only thought about yourself. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me in my tracks. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, the question hanging in the air, raw and trembling with genuine fear. I paused, my hand resting on the doorframe, and glanced back at her. You figure it out, I said evenly. Just like I have to. But this time you do it without me. Her sobs echoed behind me as I walked away, but they didn't pierce me the way they used to. I grabbed the essentials, just enough to get by, and left the house without looking back. A few days later, I moved into a small but comfortable apartment on the other side of town. At first, the silence felt oppressive, deafening. But it wasn't the same kind of silence I'd endured in my marriage. This wasn't the silence of things left unsaid or truths ignored. This was the peace of stepping away from the storm. In the weeks that followed, I started piecing my life back together. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, threw myself into my work, and even revisited hobbies I'd abandoned somewhere along the way. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. Or perhaps someone new. One evening, Patricia came over with takeout and a bottle of wine. She settled onto the couch, glancing at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. How are you holding up? She asked. Better, I replied honestly, sipping from my glass of wine. It's not easy, but every day feels a little lighter. She nodded, offering me a small smile. You deserve that, Arthur. You deserve someone who makes you feel whole, not someone who tears you apart. For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled back. A real smile, not the forced, practiced one I'd been wearing for months. Thanks, Patricia, I said sincerely, for everything. As we sat there, sharing laughter and stories, I felt something profound settle over me. Lisa's betrayal hadn't been the end of my story. It was just the end of her chapter in it. The house of cards she'd built had collapsed, but I wasn't buried in the rubble. I had walked away, scarred but stronger, ready to rebuild on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.